Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk about creating the kinds of always changing, wonderfully messy cities and towns that we humans clearly love. We'll talk with those people trying to revive them or create them anew, whether they be designers, developers, builders, planners, or just anyone interested in the conversation. Thanks so much for listening. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. Great to be back here. It's October of 2024. Sorry for the break the last couple weeks. I had a long string of travel, which I'm actually going to talk about today here on the program. And I've just been up to my eyeballs with work and catching up and especially dealing with a lot of crime and public safety issues in my city that has really fully occupied my attention and time. So this is really the first chance I've had to get away and record anything in some time, and I miss it when it when it goes some period of time. So I'm glad to be back to share a few thoughts today, and then set the table for some other things coming up this fall. So thank you again for listening. If you are new to the podcast, please hit the subscribe or follow or like button on whatever platform you're using. Leave me a review if you can. Really appreciate it. The more reviews really help uprank the podcast in various platforms. Been really happy with the growth of this over time and continuing to see it grow. And I would love to continue to increase the audience so that we can get more attention on the people and the conversations that we have on here. So really appreciate you all listening today. Couple things I want to hit on today. As I mentioned, I had a long string of travel recently, and anytime I'm able to get out of town, it enables me, maybe like you as well, to kind of clear my head, think about things in a little different way, see things in a different way. I think that's all just the beauty of travel, going to either different parts of the country or different parts of the world, and just kind of decoupling from your day-to-day experience and allowing you to maybe see your own life, your own priorities, your own day-to-day existence in a very different way, and experience how other people are living and seeing things. I love that about travel. We had we took the family to Ireland for 10 days around Labor Day. And then not long after that, I had to come home, and then I went to the annual International Downtown Association Conference in Seattle. So all of that was kind of back to back, and gave me time to sort of jot some notes down, think about a lot of things going on, and different ways that we might be able to improve some situations in our own cities. I often, very selfishly, I think about this when I travel, about what are the lessons that I can learn from my own city, my own neighborhood, my own place. What can we do better or differently in our community? And I think some of those things you can extrapolate to many, many places, but um, as always, your mileage may vary. So I do want to share a few thoughts here. First, about the experience of going to Ireland, and traveling around the country there for 10 days. And just some things that I came across, a couple of takeaways that I think are useful for, they have been useful for me in thinking about changes in my city. And then I think maybe useful for others as you think about life, especially in American cities. So, start right off the back and say, um, you know, traveling to Ireland itself is wonderful. God, we had a great time. It's such a beautiful country. unbelievably beautiful. And it's funny, there are the stereotypes of many places in the world, and it's always interesting to see like which of those stereotypes are true or which are not. um, like, just one tangent, one example, there's always the stereotype of like the French people are rude and everything else. And I've been to France, I think 3 or 4 times, and I have personally not found that to be the case at all. I have found that stereotype to really be incorrect. There are certainly parts of probably the heavily tourist areas of Paris where I think a lot of the French population gets annoyed with tourists and gets short and everything else. And so I'm sure that happens in the same way that if you are in New York City and you live in Manhattan and and you're anywhere like around Times Square and you're dealing with tourists all day long, you probably have a much shorter fuse for dealing with people. So I'm sure that happens, but I have found in my travels throughout most of France that people were really fantastic and patient and really warm. So sometimes the stereotypes are not true. I will say some of the stereotypes about Ireland that we heard going in were absolutely true, which is, it is so incredibly green for one. It's like the whole country is almost like a postcard everywhere you go. It's pretty remarkable. The people were just super nice and chatty and warm, which is also a stereotype. The pubs that you see all over Ireland are exactly like they're portrayed. They're fantastic places, and so there's a lot of that was really remarkable and enjoyable. We spent our time in 2 different parts of the country. We spent 10, like I said, 10 days overall. About half that time in County Wicklow, which is just south of Dublin. Did a day trip to Dublin as part of that time there, and then we spent the other half of the time in Northern Ireland, stationed out of a small town called Ballycastle on the coast in Northern Ireland. And we did a day trip to Belfast there as well, but we spent most of our time up and around the coast and the small towns and all of the scenery in that area, which was just remarkable and stunning. The Giant's Causeway and some of the just the natural landscape in that part of the world is it's breathtaking. So I just as a prelude to everything else, I'd say if you are somebody who has thought about going to Ireland, it's absolutely worth a visit. I'd love to go back and explore a lot more of the country. And it's a fairly easy trip from the United States. And it's a pretty easy place to navigate. Obviously, people speak English, so if you're an American, if you've ever been like even a little bit reluctant about foreign travel, I think Ireland is a terrific place to go and to get a taste of a foreign country, but where it's still really easy to get around and understand everybody. So I couldn't recommend enough. Um, so what we talk a lot about here on this podcast has to do with cities, planning, development, and how, in essence, we can make our cities more pedestrian friendly, more walkable, more conducive to kind of traditional urban lifestyles that used to exist, used to be the norm, and over the last 100 years have not become the norm in the United States. And so I'm always looking for specific takeaways that I can apply in my own community. One thing I would say, as an American, if you're somebody listening to this, you're probably somebody you might call yourself like an urbanist. I think it's easy to go to other countries and kind of focus on the really cool things that you see and experience, and maybe spend too much time and energy on that as like that's the takeaway. That you're going to come back and make your city have, Italian piazzas, and you're going to have entire like pedestrian only districts, and remarkable architecture everywhere. I love all that stuff. You know, I drink that stuff up everywhere we go, and it is truly wonderful. But the reality is that just our American cities, we have a different skeleton. than places that were built 1,000, 2,000 years ago. A different scale, a different, a different backbone for how they're all built. And there are things we can absolutely learn and take away from, especially a lot of details. But we have to be careful to think that suddenly, my city is going to turn into the same kind of, walking and biking paradise as like central Amsterdam or central Dublin in this case. And so I think we just always have to look at things in a way. It's great to enjoy it. Go there and enjoy and drink it up and have a great time and experience life in a different country. Um, but we can't expect our American cities to kind of look and feel the same way because they won't. And when we started platting and building our American cities, they actually were vastly more walkable and urban than they are today. But they had a different feel, a different context than much of what you see in Europe or Asia or South America or other parts of the world. So my feeling has always been we need to embrace that, embrace who we are, love what we are, and appreciate it for what it is because there are benefits to it. But also work to make it as good as we can possibly make it, as enjoyable, as humane as we can possibly make it. So, what I'm going to focus on here are a couple of things that may seem mundane, but I'll get to why I think they're important. So obviously, like I said, it's easy to go to places like European cities. The cities we went to in Ireland, Dublin, Kilkenny, Belfast. Those were some of the bigger places we went to. Most of the time we were in small towns, but in the bigger places, and you run across these pedestrian only streets, and they're lively and they're beautiful and they're fun. And you think, God, that's we'd love to have that, and we would. I would love to have more of that accessible to us. Um, but it, man, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but it's just not realistic for most of what we see in American cities, and we have to be really careful about forcing things onto our cities that are likely to fail. Uh, and we went through an era where we pedestrianized hundreds of downtowns and cities in the United States in the 60s and 70s in particular, and nearly all of them failed. And I do think things are different today. There's much more an interest in urban living and walkability than there was in that era. So there's more opportunities for success today, but they still those can be fragile situations. And in the American context, having some sort of vehicular traffic through spaces really helps activate it and bring more customers and give eyes to it. Now, there are many, many nuances in all that. There are one block pedestrian spaces that can be remarkably successful. There are college towns that have a much higher density of people who are normally on foot every day that can succeed. But you have to have really a captive market and population for that to succeed at any scale. And most of our cities just don't have that. And so when I go to these places in other countries, I love them, I enjoy it, but I also understand things that may work or things that may not work. However, I do see some small details that I think are important and can point us in a positive direction to help improve even our most urban communities in the United States. So I think when I think about this, I just think a lot about the Midtown area of Kansas City because that's where I live and work, and I think about things that might be helpful in this part of town. So two things that may seem strange that I focused on that are both traffic related. I'm going to explain why I think they're important, but I noticed these more this time and thought about them more this time than I had before. And so one of those is the ubiquitous use of roundabouts, which you see in most other countries in the world, and then the ubiquitous use of speed tables on all the streets and even highways throughout Ireland. Now, again, I would start by saying both of these techniques are exceptionally common all over the world. And if you're an American and you're like driving in another country, or you're in vehicles, you experience the roundabouts, you experience the speed tables, you probably think that a lot of it is annoying. And um, there are places you can drive where it's like you can't seem to hardly drive like a quarter of a mile before you've got to go over another speed table. And I think from the American experience, we might think that's really odd. But there are some things about this that I think are really important and that go towards the issue of um, taming speeding traffic. So in American cities, it's been my belief for quite some time that um, that really one of the key features to improving the success and the walkability of our places all comes back to slowing down speeding traffic. That's different from eliminating traffic or eliminating car travel, but it really goes towards the speed of what people are doing in cities and towns, and that's because the that experience of walking along a street where people are driving more than say 30 miles an hour uh, is not a good experience. And if you are somebody who is walking along there and you're near a street where people are consistently driving 40, 50 miles an hour, you're probably not going to come back to there very often unless you have to. And the it's the it, it's the palpable sense of danger, which is real. It's the noise, it's the obnoxiousness of it. It's just not a pleasant experience at all. And so, taming speeding traffic is a really big deal for us in cities. And I think as we think long term, I would diverge from a lot of my colleagues in the sense that I think we're going to have cars for a very, very long time. We're going to have a need for cars and parking for a very long period of time. Certainly, the rest of my lifetime, and much beyond that, probably for my kids' lifetime as well. I do not see the automobile as something that is going to like go away or reduce in usage dramatically, especially in the United States, anytime soon. I think it's going to be with us a long time. And I would also diverge from sort of the techno optimists who think we're all going to switch over to driverless cars. Uh, and that's going to transform everything. I don't buy it for a minute. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm also very happy to bet anybody just about any amount of money that they want that driverless vehicles are not going to radically change everything. I think we will see usage of driverless vehicles in certain specific and limited situations, but I do not expect it to be the norm, and I don't expect it to just transform society. Um, so cover me a skeptic on all that, and I would say, just in my own defense, on that issue. It's 2024 right now. It's been at least 20 years now that people have been saying ubiquitous driverless cars are 5 years away. And it keeps getting pushed another few years and another few years out. So, and I know technology evolves, and there's, with AI coming on board now, there's a lot more optimism that those things will happen more quickly. But I still don't buy it. So come at me in the comments. It's fine. I don't mind. I don't mind a friendly debate on all that, but I just don't see it happening. So the bottom line is, I think we're going to have cars and trucks and parking issues to think about for a very long period of time. And it's important for us to be thoughtful about that and realistic about it, because when you are utopian about it, you tend to jump to solutions that don't really work. Or they fail quickly, or they're expensive, and when they fail, it's embarrassing. Whereas there are things that we could do like right now that are pretty inexpensive, that would make a real difference in the lives of people in cities. And two of those things are much more ubiquitous use of roundabouts and much more ubiquitous use of speed tables in cities. Now, when I talk about speed tables, I'm not really talking about speed bumps necessarily. I think there's probably a place for those. Never been a huge fan, but the speed table is a little bit different because it also creates the opportunity for like a crosswalk for somebody. But it's also, a little easier just to navigate. If you're driving, you can see them and deal with them differently. But they do force people to slow down, and we have a lot of like pretty big wide streets that are that don't have a whole lot of traffic on them, where I would love to see speed tables every so often as a means to just getting people to slow down and pay attention to what they're doing, and reduce that average speed of traffic in an area. By the way, they would also really help with a lot of the problems we have been having in recent years with street racing, with people doing, burnouts or sideshows in the street. It would basically end that. And they cost some money to build, but they are, far less money than radical street makeovers that we spend a lot of money on. So it seems to me like that is a very easy innovation as a way to really help with speed in urban situations. And then roundabouts, I've written about this, I've talked about it a lot before. The reason I obsess and focus about this so much is that I think part of it is just because it is such a damn simple and obvious solution for dealing with intersections. It's cheaper than building signals, especially when you look at life cycle costs, because signals always have to be replaced or maintained. The electronics can break and fall apart. It in a power emergency, the roundabout still works, and people still know what to do. But most importantly, what they do, because they move traffic through an intersection at a very slow speed, but because it's constantly moving, then it has a different impact on the roadway on either side of it. So the roadway can be smaller. You can take a little pavement away from the roadway, and so it's obvious that in a lot of um, we're starting to see more of this in like rural situations in the United States, and you can see some experimentation. We have a number that have been built here in Missouri and Kansas. Um, but there's also, I think, a ton of opportunity to do this in urban situations. And when you go to cities in other countries, you see that. And you see that that these are used frequently in complex intersections in urban areas, but also as a routine measure in places where there's enough space. And uh, they're not perfect. Like from a pedestrian standpoint, they're not perfect, but the downstream effect they have on the size of the road that you need and the speed of traffic is incredible. And I just something that I wish that we could get our engineering community to do more of. And frankly, the message I would take away from all this for any of you in your community is that we need to bring these solutions more from the community level to our leadership, to our professional staffs and all, to just say we want some of these things done, because a lot of measures used to alter traffic patterns always meet a resistance at the traffic engineering level. And that's common all over the country. And, that has been the case for 60 years, ever since people started pushing back on the notion of building freeways through urban communities. And it still occurs. And so it's something that has to really push from the grassroots level. So, one of the takeaways that I have from being, in Ireland is that those are some things that we can do to really slow traffic down and dramatically enhance the pedestrian experience in American cities. They're simple things, and they're not terribly expensive. They don't generally need millions and millions of dollars to happen, and a lot of them could be done pretty quickly. And that really goes to kind of my overall philosophy about what we can do today and what I think will work for American cities for the coming decades, which is really focusing on the pedestrian experience first and foremost. How can we make it better, more beautiful, more inviting, more attractive for people just to walk on sidewalks? And then from a broader transportation perspective, um, making sure that we have parking that is actually coordinated and well managed, that we find ways to enhance the use of e-bikes, because I do think e-biking is a transformational technology. And that's something, especially in cities, that can be really useful. And then enhancing sort of small, nimble transit options, which fit well with American cities. So, whether that's Uber or some various versions of Uber, Lyft, or whatever, that technology that has actually been transformational for the way that a lot of people get around all manner of sizes of cities. I think it's going to be with us for a long time, and the more we can do to kind of enhance that and make it more viable is it will be really helpful for those of us who are trying to create more humane and urban communities. So, a couple of quick thoughts there about trips to the trip to Ireland. May seem like a strange couple of takeaways from going to such a beautiful, interesting place. There's obviously a whole lot more that was interesting. I thought about there. The history is incredible. It's always amazing and humbling to go to a country where the culture is so ancient compared to the United States, and really kind of emphasizes how young our country is. We do have history. There are unique aspects of American culture, but it's just, it's a really different thing when you go to a place where the physical history is 1,500, 2,000 years old or more. And it just, it really ties you to a deeper sense of connection, I think, to humans from a long time ago. And there's so much about that is deeply fascinating. So if you get the chance, please do it. I am going to have a future episode as well, where I'm going to talk about travel hacking. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that idea, but it's basically a way to use credit cards and sign up bonuses and everything as a system to really get all sorts of free travel. I think some of you probably already do aspects of this today to some degree, but I learned more about the system of doing it probably 10 or 15 years ago, and it's been completely transformational in my and our family's ability to travel and travel very inexpensively. So we're going to talk more about that in a future episode. We're going to dive deep into the world of travel hacking, because I know that I think many of you really enjoy traveling, either, again, not just around the US, but to other parts of the world. And there are really cool ways to do that and really minimize your costs in doing so, which means that you can then experience even more places. So it's um, kind of a cool virtuous circle once you learn the system behind it. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about IDA. The final thought I had, and this is going to be kind of a transitional thought to the IDA, but one of the things I really notice. So we spent some time, like I said, we spent several days in this cute little town called Ballycastle, Northern Ireland. And, walking around the town, different days, you walk by, you're right there on the main street in the middle of town is the school, is, an elementary school. And then there's like a playground and everything nearby and some playing fields. And it's just, it's just wonderful to see that scale of, of activity, for lack of a better word. I'm kind of struggling, I said, a little bit with how to describe that, but the size of that school was basically just like a little one-story building. I don't know how many kids went to school there. Just judging by, going by there, who knows, maybe 100 kids. Um, but it fits so well in the middle of the town. You could see kids, coming to school, leaving school, just walking around, leaving there and walking around the town. Uh, and it's just like it just seems very natural as a part of day to day life. Um, and I couldn't help but walk by that and think that, there's literally like nowhere in the United States where a school of that size would basically be like allowed anymore, like a public school of that size. And we have embarked on a program for 70 years to just make all of our schools bigger and bigger and bigger. That is as true in rural areas as it is in urban areas. And it used to be incredibly common to just have the neighborhood school, to have the small town school. And some of those schools would be what we would describe today as like one section schools, which means that like one class per grade. And years ago, school standards changed in the United States to basically push everything to be what they call four section schools. So where you have like four classes per grade. So it basically, pushed bigness on everything. And that, along with school consolidation, um, has meant that like even in rural areas now, that's why you will see, instead of like the school being in the middle of town, you'll see like a really big school out in the country, between towns or on the edges of towns, in a place where literally like nobody can walk to it, and it's disconnected from the community itself. And I just see these things, and it's amazing to me just how stupid our public policy has been in regards to thinking about community, what's good for people, what's good for kids, and all in this kind of push towards bigness and efficiency. And I focus a lot on schools. Probably think more about schools now because I have kids in elementary school, but I've always been fascinated by the school issue itself, and even did a bunch of research on this years ago when I had a night fellowship. I had a fellowship through the night program in community building through the University of Miami. And my focus was really looking at a lot of school standards and citing standards and everything. And I learned a lot about it at that time, but it's been interesting to see the evolution of that. And uh, a real takeaway that you have when I think you go to, especially a lot of other countries, is just how the push towards bigness in a lot of United States policy has worked completely against the desire or the success of kind of authentic, human scaled communities. And uh, that's something that I hope we can have more honest conversations about and try to look at how we might change that. Because it's been obvious to me that that's been detrimental across many institutions and many efforts that we've had. And so I don't want to bury the lead on this too much, but I am going to talk about this topic a lot more with Jeff Graham on his podcast, the Yeoman podcast, later this month. And so I think we're going to dive deeper into this whole topic of bigness, and then centralization and localization, and how we think there are some better approaches to to building, to communities, and especially to the management of place. I think it's a big deal, and that's really the transition I would have to just a couple of quick comments about the IDA conference in Seattle. So. Again, as I've mentioned, the IDA, the International Downtown Association, really interesting organization. It's sort of the trade group for my day job with Midtown KC Now. But and it is kind of what it sounds like. It's basically downtown oriented groups from all over, largely North America, United States. I'd say mostly United States and Canada, and um, and a lot of them are larger city downtowns. So, like for example, our downtown organization here, Downtown Kansas City, participates and is very active in the group. And if you're in a larger city, almost certainly your downtown organization does too. But a lot of these are what are called place management organizations. And they're called that because over time they have taken on many responsibilities that a lot of people think are just the responsibility of local government. So clean and safe programs, marketing the community, any number of efforts to manage public space and make it attractive and inviting. And, and so once a year they get together. This year it was in Seattle. Um, and it, it it's fascinating to hear the conversations and be in the room as people are talking about these things. Our organization's a little bit of a square peg in a round hole with IDA because we're not a downtown group. We're downtown adjacent, and we have a strong kind of base of residential areas that have existed for 100 years or more, and a lot of downtowns, frankly, don't have that. Many have done a good job of building that the last few decades, but it's not as much. So, two things that I just want to share as quick takeaways. One was I have talked before here on this podcast about the importance of public safety and how crime is a real issue that we should take very, very seriously, especially those of us who love big cities. If you're an urban lover and you're not taking the crime issue seriously, you're really missing the boat, because normal people who are not hardcore urban lovers really do care about it, and they're very sensitive to it. And the fascinating thing was at one session that I was at, when the moderator asked just a poll of hands in the audience, like, has violent crime gotten better, worse, or the same in the last year for these groups around the room? About 3/4 of the hands went up and said worse, and which I found really interesting, because certainly the the narrative and the national data has been that crime has been getting better, that it peaked in maybe 21 or so, and it's gotten better. But the people who are managing things on the ground and dealing with it are not saying that. So that was fascinating. Um, the other thing I would share, um, that is fascinating, when you talk to people in this session, when you hear people in these organizations talk freely, and I not saying this just to try to be controversial, but it's just palpable when you are with organizations like this. And these are city people. These are people who really care about their communities. They're deeply involved on a day-to-day basis with trying to make them as good as they can possibly be. But one common thread is that big city local governments in American cities is just really bad. Um, it's frequently dysfunctional, very siloed, expensive, and there's a lot of frustration with people who have to interact with their local governments. And it seems to be much more ubiquitous in large cities. Um, so, I don't think it has to be this way. I think we have, I've talked about this before and we'll talk about this again. I think we have some really bad systems. We have some really good people who work in really bad systems, but the systems are a problem. And we are not getting good results from a lot of our big city local governance. So the question is, how do we change that? How do we improve it? And I think that's a conversation I would love to talk about more. I've got some probably radical thoughts on that. And I think we're in a period where it's a good time to entertain some radical thoughts, because we just have some things that aren't just flat out aren't working. And I've never been a fan of just continuing to double down on things that aren't working. If they're not working, they should change. And we should embrace, experimenting and trying to change things, because the goal, obviously, is to serve the residents and the people who do business in a city, and to serve them to the best of our abilities. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on today that I just think doesn't have to be the way it is, and it just takes some people of goodwill and civic mindedness to try to figure out uh, different ways to reinvent local government, because I think we're in desperate need of reinventing local government in American cities. All right, I think I'm going to stop right there today. I want to say thanks again and really appreciate everybody for listening. I would love to hear all of your thoughts in the comments. I get a number of emails as well, and I do try to respond to all the emails. If I don't get to them in a timely fashion, just know that I'm really busy, and I will get to them at some point. But I appreciate everybody's comments and listening. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. This is the Messy City Podcast. I look forward to talking to you with you again. Bye.